tere õhtust! Suur rõõm on teid siin täna näha, täna hakkas kevad, meile üllatuslikult, et ei plaaninud täpselt kevade alguspäeval seda üritust. Plaanisime küll seda kaua, aga väga tore avada just kevade stardil seda tänast õhtut. Mina olen Margit, olen selle maja tegevjuht. Iga näitus, mis me siin majas oleme teinud, varsti juba nüüd 6 aastat, on nagu sest esimest korda teeks. Iga näitus on nii ärevust tekitav, mõnusat suvinat tekitav. Samamoodi on väga emotsionaalne näituste lõpp. See kokkupakkimine sama emotsionaalne, aga ikkagi see rõõm sellest näituse algusest on suurem. Et väga suur rõõm. Täna on siin seda näitust avada kellegiga, kes kunstnikud me siia tuua ei saa, siis me alati mõtleme, keda me saame tuua, sest see osa sellest, et me kedagi maailmas saame siia tuua, on suur osa sellest, kuidas me neid lugusid siin taga avame, ja et suur rõõm on täna anda lava Elliotti lähedalt tundnud, viimastel 10+ aastat väga tihedalt koostööd teinud, samamoodi newyorklasele, nagu oli Elliott. Aga siin ma annaksin teate hulga edasi meie suurepärasele giidile Elole, kes meil on ka meie algusaastatest olnud siin meiega koos ja usaldame alati tema kätte kõik selle õhtu. Nii et aitäh!
Aitäh, mul vist seda ei ole vaja. Tere minu poolt ka, mina siis Elo ja ma siis püüan selle suure olulise tööga täna hakkama saada, aga I will switch to English now as Douglas speaks English as his native language. I think that will be more helpful for you as well.
Thank you very much.
So a warm welcome once again from our side.
Thank you, you've been great. It's happy to be here.
And such a pleasure to have you here. So tonight we will start off by a movie. It's a short documentary which is done by you. So Douglas Sloan, the author of the movie. And we will watch the movie from these smaller screens and also from the big one there. So maybe just a short introduction into the movie. And then after that, we will continue with the talk where we will discuss a lot about Elliott and how you became to know him and all of these things and his works, of course. Okay. But maybe if you want to say just a few words as an introduction to your short documentary, that would be helpful.
I think the only thing appropriate to say is that this was a piece that was commissioned by the International Center of Photography Museum in New York. It was part of a series of award recognitions, films that we did over a period of more than 10 years. And we just expanded one of them on Elliott to make into a full-blown short film. And I think it's best that you watch the film first, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Okay.
So enjoy the movie, and we will be shortly back on the stage to continue with the talk. Okay, thank you. So I think this, calls for an applause.
Thank you.
Okay. So we were just saying to each other that, wow, the movie actually says quite a lot about Elliott. So I'm not
sure
we're
going to leave now.
Yeah, we're going to leave. But no, actually, we've been really eager to have this talk because for the past 2 days, pretty much, we've been talking non-stop about Elliott, his works, his inspirations, his philosophy for photography, etc. Mm-hmm. But maybe first off, we'll start with your movie because I think it's interesting because his character really shines through there, which is not very common in Elliott's case, because he's not the easiest person, which might be a bit surprising for you, because looking at his photos, I think you get a bit of a different understanding of his character, but you know better.
Yes, I do, firsthand. I guess I should just start by describing what it was like to speak to Elliott when I was first told to give him a call to introduce myself, which is kind of the way the museum did it in the days. They gave us an assignment. These are the people to do the films, and here's a phone number, and give them a call and start the project. And when you call Elliott, he answers the phone, he goes, speaking, and then silence. So it's very off-putting from the get-go. And then what I had to do after that was get past that and then explain to him this concept of trying to get him to go with the flow of this alter ego character, Andreas Solador, which you saw in the film. And if it's, should I describe that whole situation? So the way that came about was we were looking for an angle for the film, something that might be a little bit different. And my creative associate found out that he had developed this alter ego character to the point where he had published a book. So all those photographs that you see while he is in that character are photographs that he set up and took under that name. They published a book, and it went so far as to have a gallery show in London and sold work under that name. So he took that alter ego character to the nth degree, if you will, and we thought that was a pretty amazing thing, and asked him if he would go along and help us stage this whole thing and recreate that character. And he amazingly said yes, which we did not expect. And he went all in, and it was quite an effort to pull that off. But he was 80 years old, I think, at the time. So, and we had a lot of fun doing it, and we think it was a little bit different than the straight-ahead Elliott. But I'll just also say, based on what Elliott said, is that he didn't like, as he says in the film, to pontificate or talk a lot about his work. And so it's kind of difficult in a way to sit here and try to describe or break down the work or try to put a meaning to, alternate meaning to the work that he feels like it is what you see there. He captured moments. He called his photographs snaps. He would not call them photographs. He described his career as being a professional photographer with a hobby, and the professional photography, what he meant by that is all the commercial assignments that he took, which were many, and that's how he supported himself. And the hobby was all the work that we considered to be brilliant and genius work. But those are the words that he used: hobby, snaps, things of that sort. And hopefully you start to get a sense of his philosophy about photography. And you can call it classic or traditional way of looking at things. I mean, there's obviously, especially these days, you could argue that, manipulating images or images as art is what we've come to accept. But he personally never really accepted that. And, there were a couple of ironies in that regard, too. You just tell me when to stop.
No, go ahead. It's all good so far.
One that I'll just mention, the family of man, which I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. Are you? Anybody? Should I explain what that is? Yes? No?
I think you can go ahead and explain it.
Okay. The family of man was a very important exhibit that was the Museum of Modern Art put on, and it was curated and started by Edward Steichen, the photographer. And that was the first time that photography was starting to be looked at in an art environment, in an art context. And the irony that I'm mentioning is Steichen, who was very influential in the photo secession movement, and that photo secession movement was a movement that purpose was to elevate photographs as an art form. So something that Elliott did not believe in. But here he was at the age of 26, by the way, already being shown in this exhibit called The Family of Man. And it was called The Family of Man because the objective was to represent the human condition around the world. There were about 500 images from various photographers, and it was to show the human condition at that point. So,
So maybe we can take a few steps back for maybe those in the audience who don't know that much about Elliott Erwitt. As weirdly enough, you can find a lot of his images, and I think we're all familiar with some of his images. But at the same time, we don't know much about the person Elliott Erwitt was, and I think for him that was the way he wanted it, because he was the photographer, and there was not much about him as a person. And that, I think, shines through his art as well, or his photographs. I don't think he would like us to call it art, actually, but the way that he took photos, because for him it wasn't so much as a self-expression as it was just a way of living and his craft, so to speak. But maybe just to go back, and you already mentioned Edward Steichen, and I think it's important to talk about three different people that were really influential in his life. One of them being Edward Steichen, then of course Robert Capa, and of course Ray Stryker as well.
Right.
So I think maybe we can talk about them and how actually they influenced or kind of kickstarted his career, to be honest. And maybe we start by Roy Stryker.
Roy Stryker, okay.
Yeah. If that's, yeah.
Sure. I don't know that much about him, but Roy Stryker ran an organization called the Farm Security Association, and they were responsible for documenting what was happening in agriculture, I might be getting this wrong, agriculture across the country. And one of the assignments, he gave Elliott his first real job, his first real commercial job, which was shooting for, I think, Standard Oil in New Jersey. He also gave Elliott an assignment to shoot in Pittsburgh to document what was happening there, the urban strife that existed in Pittsburgh, and Elliott did that for him. And it was based on that body of work, not solely, because Elliott had done other things also. He had photographed authors for the Knopf publishing organization in New York, some famous authors, so that was part of his portfolio, and there's a few others. But anyway, that body of work caught the attention of Robert Capa when Elliott went to introduce himself. And as I think I was saying earlier today, those were the days when people like Capa and Stryken and Roy, for that matter, were approachable. And these days, to get to higher ups or to show your portfolio at the Museum of Modern Art is not an easy task by any means. But he managed to get through to these people, and Capa was very impressed with his work, and to the point where he had started the organization called Magnum. And I think you heard Elliott talk about Magnum. And Magnum was a collective of photographers. I guess it started in the late 40s, or I'm really not sure the exact date that it started. But we're talking about around 1951 now, when Elliott met Capa. And Capa said, when you get out of the army, I'd like you to join Magnum. And for Elliott, that was his basis. I mean, Henri Cartier-Bresson, which is, as far as Elliott was concerned, is the gold standard of capturing the decisive moment, as Bresson called it, and it was one of Elliott's great influencers. So the idea that when he got out of the army, which was 2 years later in 1953, and he joined Magnum, that started his career. He was with his own ilk, and
and considering how young he was, I mean, to be a member of the Magnum Photos agency at that age was really something, because at that time already the Magnum Photos had such a good reputation that all you had to say was that I'm part of the Magnus, and that was already quite enough. So,
right.
So that was really fortunate for him.
Absolutely. I mean, at 24 he was with Magnum, and at 26 he had shown at the Museum of Modern Art, and that's pretty impressive.
But Elliott's story really is a story of connections, because these three people that we mentioned, they really played a very significant role in him becoming who he is, or who he was as a photographer. But the brief mentioning of him being drafted into army was also a lucky strike, considering that it was in 51 when he was drafted to army, and at that time USA was in war with Korea, so it could have gone either way. So he could have been sent into Korea, where a lot of men lost their lives, but instead he was actually stationed in Germany and in France, where he literally had a lot of free time, which is weird considering in the context of war, but he had a lot of free time. He had his own car, so he was able to drive around, and on his days off he was taking a lot of photos. So he got very lucky with that. And this is actually where he's sort of this kind of traveling and taking photos of these mundane and even you could call them banal moments, which he's very known about. That's where his love for that really started.
I think he won a photo contest
During that
while he
time?
was in the army. Yes.
Yeah.
And it might have been that photograph of the soldier who's looking right at the camera, blowing that bubble. But
unfortunately, we don't have that photo here, but it was in the movie,
film,
and
right.
yeah, and you can easily look it up and find. And of course, although he's taking also a lot of photos of the soldiers and of some of the higher-ranking officers as well, all of his photos, even at that time, even in the context of war, they still stay very lighthearted. And I think maybe now we can talk about his style and why he was maybe actually quite different from the other Magnum photographers, and also the way that he. You already mentioned that he wasn't very fond of talking about his works as art, or even mentioning that they're photographers. That they're photographs, because for him they were really snaps, like you said. But there's a whole philosophy he had behind it. So maybe we can delve into that a bit.
Yeah. Again, it's. You don't want to over-articulate here, but because he breaks it down basically to the idea of seeing, and it's not what you see, but it's how you see it. And what becomes very obvious when you look at the body of his work is how he saw the world and what moments he saw. There was a prominent photographer that at his memorial service that I attended that described standing next to Elliott and looking at the same thing that Elliott was looking at, and Elliott took a photograph, and the photograph that he took was not something that this other very prominent photographer could see. So he just had this uncanny knack of being able to see these moments or waiting for these moments. Nothing. He didn't stage things. There was maybe this is a good lead-in. I was always fascinated with the term that he uses in the film called managed documentary, and there's very few, except for some of the commercial work that he's done, are set up. So. The California Kiss is not set up. He mentions the one of the woman jumping across the reflective water in Paris. That was set up. The dog thing was set up. Right, the one behind us.
The one behind us,
right.
yeah.
But that's because they were for commercial assignments. But his work, his personal work, was not. And he just captured these moments. It was the way that he saw. I think I lost the train of thought there.
No, I'll help you back on track.
Please,
but yeah, I
you
think I did promise to remember a lot of things as well. But talking about his hobby work, which was for himself, and then his professional work. Another interesting thing is at that time at Magnum Photos, it wasn't very appreciated that photographers at their level did commercial works. So, but for Elliott, that was never something that he opposed. He's actually said in many, many interviews that he's always been very grateful for the commercial work. And for him, although he kept them very separate, at the same time, they served the same purpose, because while he was doing commercial work, he also took his time to do his private work. And for that reason, he always brought 2 cameras on every assignment he had. So one was for the client, so to speak, and one was for himself. And he often used the Leica M3. I think that was
Leica M3.
Leica M3, which was his all-time favorite. But yeah, he never opposed the commercial work. So interestingly, but to make the distinction, which you can also make in this exhibition here, in order to understand which was commercial, which was personal work, usually the commercial work always was in color, and his personal work was always in black and white. Although once again, with these little distinctions that, for example, this one is in black and white, although originally
it might have been in color. I don't know for sure, but it could have been.
But his own works were never ever in color, and it's often debated, like, why was it that way? And he has said quite a few times that for him color was too much, that his life was complicated enough, so black and white was good enough for him. And oddly, he would also mention that color often just disturbs and has too much information and is just overly exaggerated, but black and white is something where he can really express his true sort of thought or meaning.
Right. In Elliott's language, he said, color gets in the way, was how he phrased it. And the black and white gave him the opportunity to manipulate in the printing process, where his color images did not. And as she just said, he felt that color has too much information in it, and didn't like that idea. So
but oddly enough, when Elliott began his career, he was throughout his life a very practical person. We talked about this, that early on he actually would have wanted to become not so much a photographer but a filmmaker.
That's how I understood it. He wanted to become a filmmaker. He studied film. He just didn't think that he could support himself as a filmmaker, and he had already started to generate income as a still photographer at the time, so he just went with that, and his commercial work became more and more successful, and then off of that his hobby work became noted, and that became successful, so that's what propelled his career. But while we're on it, in the 1980s, he stopped shooting stills pretty much and dedicated himself to 2 years of making films, live action films. He had a contract with HBO. I think he did 18 films for them, and did a couple of independent films as well. We've brought 4 of them. We're in the process of trying to get those films restored now, but we bought some low-resolution copies of them that, if you want to stick around after we speak to see, they're actually mentioned in the film that you saw of mine, where called Beauty Knows No Pain, and the other one Good Nudes, and there was one of the Many Faces of Dustin Hoffman, and then there's one other one that's there too.
But yeah, as a special treat, we will be showing them tonight for you. After the talk, we will have them showing on the screens. So 2 of them, as we mentioned, and yeah, they're currently being under restoration. So hopefully, we might have the opportunity to show all of them. But tonight, as a very special treat, only for tonight, you will be seeing 2 of them.
Yep.
So do stick around. But yeah, maybe going back to the occurring or reoccurring themes of his works, because this exhibition here is also divided into themes. As you can see, we have these little words, or let's say words that kind of put together the series of his images throughout literally 7 decades of his life work. And these divisions have been decided by Elliott himself. So this is how he gathered his works. And also something that has been rather interesting about his way of working is that he was a kind of a photographer that often went back to his contact sheets, so constantly looking through his works and then piling together either books or putting together different exhibitions. And I think it's quite remarkable how many photography books he has published. I think there's over 40 by now.
50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a couple of things I could say about that at least, that he has said. The last count or figure I saw was that he was responsible for over 600,000 images, which is insane. And I also, when we got into the research for the film, and we were in his studio and looking at contact sheets for the research, and I said this earlier the other day, it was amazing the percentage of quality shots on a contact sheet. In many instances, photographers will shoot many rolls of film to get the one great shot. There's a shot here of the woman that was photographed in Nicaragua, of the woman with the melon breast, right? That was number 36 on his roll. There are 36 frames in a roll of film. That was number 36. He got that in one shot. So the percentage of quality images was extraordinary. And he actually liked the idea of finding images in the contact sheets. He liked the idea that they were being seen in a different context than what he remembered at the time of shooting that. That's a perfect example that was said earlier of finding that image 25 years later when he's going through his archives. And he loved making books. In the end, that was his favorite thing to do until he passed. He was making a book till the day he died. The matter of fact, if not the last book he did, was called Lost but Found.
Found, not lost.
Found, not lost. And about all these images that he just thought were worth publishing. But he liked the idea of designing them. He worked with a designer, and over 50 books, which is, again, extraordinary.
At least one book a year. That was pretty much so.
Well,
or
there you
even
go. That's the
math.
That's the math, I guess. Yeah. Right, yeah.
And he kept on working until the very end, because when he passed away in 2023, then he was really still much in the game, publishing and doing, still taking photos, etc.
To a degree. I mean, the last few years were rough.
Yeah,
I mean,
rough,
they were not most
yeah.
pleasant. But yes, he until that point, he was his brains were intact, and he would religiously watch the news. He was very politically inclined. I mean, for someone that didn't take, well, he always took his work seriously, but again, didn't want to put it on a higher ground. He was. He paid attention to what was going on in our country, in America, to the point where what was happening, especially when Trump got elected the first time, he was very, very upset about that. And as I was saying over dinner, I think last night, had he been alive to see what happened now, he probably would be better off not being around. It probably would have killed him.
Good for him. So that he missed this.
Right. So.
But yeah, going maybe a little bit back to the politics, not heavily, because we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but still, he was also a press. He was a press photographer for the White House, which is quite impressive. And he's one of the photographers who has taken most of the president photos throughout his career.
Is that true?
So, yeah.
11. Yes, I think you're right. 11 presidents he covered. Yep.
So that's quite the number.
Yep.
But yeah, the story actually, how he got the press card, or to be the proper accredited press photographer for the White House, was because he knew very well the press secretary for JF Kennedy. Yeah, because they had been previously working together, and although in order to get the White House press card, you usually need to be from Washington, or at least positioned and stationed in Washington. He wasn't, but nonetheless he got actually to be the photographer, the official photographer.
You are the new expert on Elliott Erwitt.
Thank you.
She's incredible.
Probably not.
By the way, knows way more than I do at this particular point, or anybody, even more than people in Elliott's family. So.
Well, the more you delve into his works, the more interesting he gets as a person. So it's It's his fault, so to speak.
Right.
But we do have a very special photograph here, which is of Jackie Kennedy. It's a very sad photograph, and Elliott wasn't really a big fan of talking about it, because I think the reason behind it is because he was so humble, and he never wanted to take advantage of people in their vulnerable state. And of course, Jackie, having lost his husband at that time very recently, and that photo is taken at the JFK's funeral. It's a heartbreaking photo, and you can see all the emotions running through her, and it's a beautiful photo at the same time. So although Elliott wasn't too keen on talking about it, then I think it still deserves to be talked about and to be seen.
Right.
Yeah.
Over his dead body. No, but
dark humor.
Well, two things. One, when he's asked about that photograph, there are people that say he just goes silent and won't talk about it. So I won't talk about it. But I think it's not so much, and I'm just making the assumption here that he was afraid of putting it out there for other people. I think you need to recognize that was a very emotional time for him. As I said, he was very politically involved. He was a press photographer working in the White House with Kennedy, so he saw what was going on. So to witness that funeral and be part of that historic event moved our nation, moved the entire world. So for him to be up close to that was just probably a very emotional moment for him. So
that makes sense. It's yeah. But nonetheless, it's a great photograph. So, and I think we've all, at least we can imagine it in our heads, because I remember, not that I remember, but when it was a big thing also, worldwide. When it happened, then all the newspapers were covering the story, and there was a lot of footage about that unfortunate moment. So, and it's here, and it wasn't included before, so it's great to be able to see it actually here in live.
Right. Yeah. What I would say, which I said earlier today on the tour too, is that and I think you touched upon it. His multidisciplinary ability across the photographic spectrum was incredible as well. And what I mean by that is that even the commercial assignment work, it was everything from architectural photography to, fashion. They did some fashion, although he abhorred the fashion business. Studio work. And then there's the photojournalistic work or photojournalism, like the Kennedy shot and others there. So you see here in this exhibition, not just one style, not just one approach to photography, and that again is extraordinary for coming out of one man and one man's mind.
Mm-hmm. And he has said so many times in different interviews and also in different articles that he loved absolutely the life of a photojournalist, because he was constantly, you know, on the go, always traveling somewhere. And I think he really loved this kind of nomadic lifestyle. It was, and I think it shows through also in your documentary, where he says that he wasn't really built for the marital life, so to speak.
Yes.
Although he was a great family man, and his 6 children are probably all very happy about having a father like that. Yeah.
I think they are. I think they
and
are.
we actually see a few photos of his children here as well. There's 2 children present in this exhibition, as much as we've been able to discover.
Right.
So his first child, Ellen,
right.
and his latest girl, Amy. So we'll be happy to point them out to you later on. But yeah, these are also beautiful photos. But yeah, like you said, his works range from politics to dogs, and I think our audience here are quite familiar with his dogs photos, at least the ones who were here for 2022 when we had our pets exhibition, where we showed a lot of dogs, but other pets as well, and Elliott's works were presented here with about, I think, 10 photos. And this time we also have them here, but we have them in a digital format, and there's a larger selection of dogs. But even
we have a live dog.
And
right
we
here.
have a live dog,
right
which is
there.
lovely. Yeah. Actually, when you were telling me the story that when Elliott's the same exhibition, roughly the same, was in Shanghai. As part of the opening exhibition, and they, as part of their opening event, they actually invited everyone with dogs. So you can only imagine what was going on there.
Yes, you can only imagine.
So we can play with that idea if we'll ever do that. But coming back to the dogs part, because I still wanna stay there for a little while, because your documentary was also called "I Bark at Dogs."
Right.
And this is something that Elliott literally did. This was his way of getting the dog's attention, often sometimes the owner's attention, not maybe in the nicest way, because he did manage to scare a few people. And there was even this fortunate incident in Kyoto where he was walking behind a woman with her dog, and then he decided to bark at the dog, and the woman thought it was her dog barking and turned around and kicked the dog. Hopefully not too badly, but so anyway, he was famous about barking at dogs.
He also, I mean, you know, this is good. This is also falls under this managed documentary umbrella. You know, how you get shots. So his bark was one way, and he also had a horn, something like a Harpo Marx horn that he would use to get people to react. And I think he started using that when he was starting to shoot these authors for the book publisher. And he would just take the horn out and honk it and get the reaction. And so, and at his memorial service at the dais, we had the horn there.
Oh, wow.
And all the speakers, I was not one of the speakers, but all the speakers just used that as a segue to get from one speaker to the other with the horn.
I think he was very, there was these 2 sides to him which don't necessarily go together, because I remember that you as well said that it was really hard to sort of get him talking, and I think most of the people who have ever interviewed him live have struggled, because he was a man of not many words, and he has this quote where he says that talk is pretty cheap in photography, and then he continues saying that, and I think too many photographers nowadays do that. So he was really, I mean, he expressed himself through his photos, and yeah, he really didn't like to talk about his works or about anything for that matter, pretty much.
You know, I wouldn't say about anything, or that he was a man of few words, but the words that he spoke were acute observations of whatever the subject matter was. And I think anybody that knew him, I mean, I don't want you to get the wrong impression. We were not best friends. I mean, I knew him for 11 or 12 years, and we connected after the film, and we did socialize periodically. And I think we understood one another. The film, for whatever it's worth, was one of his favorites, and he insisted. So we connected over that. But I've heard from his very close friends, you know, that he was always throwing dinner parties with his friends, other photographers, other interesting people. He was a food person or a foodie, and they would bring in chefs from all over the world to cook at these dinner parties. So I don't want to give you the impression that he was antisocial or a hermit or anything like that. It just, especially as life went on, he got tired, like anybody else would, of being asked the same old questions, and he felt that. A lot of them were just boring questions, and he just he didn't want to play the game. That was his whole thing. He never played the game of being the photographer or the celebrity, and he didn't like the limelight to a degree, and so.
And oddly, it is contradictory in a way, because I think there's not another photographer who has that many known quotes that like Elliott has.
Right.
And I think you and I, we were saying, like, because you were noting down a few quotes and I was noting down a few quotes, and literally pretty much whenever he did decide to say something, it was kind of like pure
they're great.
gold.
Right.
Yeah,
They make
really
a lot of
good
sense.
ones. Yeah. And one of my favorite ones, which is super simple, is the best things happen when you just happen to be somewhere with a camera. So that's a good recommendation for anyone. And then another one that he often said to people who were starting out their career as photographers is like, they asked always Elliott, like, what would you recommend, or how to become you, and what should I do? And he always said, just keep busy, and if possible, keep it as a hobby. Don't do it professionally, which is contradictory.
Find
because
a day job, I think, is what he said.
Basically, well, he was a very practical man, so yeah.
Yes, I mean, he was very lucky in terms. Well, you make your own luck, but the amount of commercial work that he was able to get was pretty amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
And again, across all spectrums. I have all these quotes if you want to.
Yeah, do you
but
want to?
we can do it at the end if you want.
We can do it at the end.
Okay,
maybe in the
fine.
meanwhile, we can ask if maybe someone in the audience has a question for
yeah,
Douglas.
that would be great. So we don't have to.
Yeah, not that we mind, but yeah, it would be nice
Yes.
to have you maybe ask something if you have. Otherwise, we will continue. Anything? Nothing?
Oh, come on! There has to be one question out there.
At least one. Maybe.
No?
No? Oh, there is. Okay, we see two hands. Mm-hmm.
I wonder if for this film from Magnum Agency, he was hanging out or friends. He has been most of the time.
Mm-hmm. You mean other photographers from the Magnum?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What was the question?
Who he was hanging out with from the Magnum and who he'd maybe aspired to. I think we can start with Henri Cartier-Bresson.
We can start and end there because I don't know.
he did actually Pellegrini. You helped me with
Paolo?
that. Yes.
Pellegrini?
Yes. He because when he was asked in an interview, like, who would he, what kind of other photographers would he bring out as inspiration? Then of course Henri Cartier is the first one that you would say, but then he goes on and mentions quite a few other photographers.
Well,
from
I would
the
say
Magnum.
Joseph Kudelka, which
Yeah,
I mentioned the other
definitely.
night. That's a photographer, and if you don't know his work, I strongly.
Can you say the name again so that?
Josef. And it's Kudelka, Koudelka, Kudelka.
Kudelka.
Right. So I know they were pretty close. Matter of fact, Elliott got Joseph into Magnum. That was the connection there. There are others. A few names that I'm escapes
And the one
me
you
right
mentioned
now.
yesterday, Pellegrini.
No, I don't.
No?
I don't think so because he's much younger.
Okay.
I could be mistaken. He's. Paolo's pretty young.
But he did say that he really, pretty much all the photographers that are in the Magnum Photo Agency, he really considered as good photographers because there is, there's this common connection which unites all of them who they belong to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So pretty much all of those photographers from there. Anyone else? I think I saw another hand before. Maybe not. No. Yep.
Snaps. We spoke about favorite snaps, but was there a least favorite photo of Elliott that he didn't like but is famous?
Elliott would love that question, I think, maybe.
Or hate it.
Or hate it, yeah, could go either way.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
I don't. Interestingly, I think even the fact that whenever he went back to his contact sheets, that he kept on finding good works, I think that somehow reflects the fact that he's okay with most of his works. That he was really kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody in his position or any, photographer, artist, whatever label you want to put on, would put out work that they weren't fond of. So one has to think, unless somebody printed something without him knowing it, that he approved of all of these, and if he didn't like it, it wouldn't be here. So
but that actually reminds me of the story of the Nikita Khrushchev and Nixon's photo, because not that he wasn't fond of it, but there's a good story with it, because I think the Estonian audience probably also knows that Nikita Khrushchev and Nixon's photo, which was taken in '59, and funnily, you would imagine that he was precisely there, so Elliott was precisely there to take that photo because the Vice President Nixon was visiting Moscow on a state visit. But no, Elliott was just in Moscow, happened to be there at the exact same time, promoting refrigerators as a way of showing Russia that what a great country America is and what great refrigerators they have. So while they were in this kind of studio kitchen, Nixon walks in together with Nikita Khrushchev. They got into an argument might be the right word. You get it?
Yeah, I mean, Elliott thinks what the image looks like and what was said about it was more than actually was happening there. I mean, he says, quote unquote, it was all bullshit because, as you were saying, there was Westinghouse. Elliott was working for Westinghouse, and they were trying to promote capitalism, and it was Nixon that said, in the United States, we eat well, we eat meat, and we have technology here, and in Russia, in the communist world, you eat like peasants and all the rest of it. And according to Elliott, Khrushchev said, "Go fuck my grandmother," is exactly what he said. Pardon my French here, right? But that's what he said, and he caught that moment, and then it was made to be a big thing in the election, and Nixon started using that because, it was a power thing, it was a power, and Elliott didn't like Nixon, hated the idea that he was trying to use that to get elected, and fortunately he did not get elected, but. Yeah. So it's not that he wasn't fond of the shot; he just wasn't fond of the way it was being used or interpreted at the time.
Which is an important key factor, because what Elliott really strongly stood for, and what he was quite known in the Magnum agency as well, was actually the copyright. And he had this very special pin made, which was actually in Latin, but what it translated into was "copyright is sacred." And I think he was really responsible, because we were discussing the other night that probably thanks to Elliott, it was really important for the Magnum photographers to keep their copyrights, and he really fought for that, and he always said later in his interviews as well that he never worked for any outlet that would take away his copyright or would ask for his copyright. Right. So and when he actually served as the president for the Magnum photo agency for 3 consecutive years. So right. He started he was first time the president in 68, and then I think he continued for 3 years.
Yep.
So he really made a huge impact also when it comes to copyright for photographers. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. So I think you and I could keep on talking forever, so
we could.
Last chance for you to maybe have a question. We'd be happy to take. Yes, I see a hand.
Hello. In street photography community, you could say that he's a legend. But did he ever consider it to be a real genre, or he just shot what he liked?
Did he ever consider it
as a genre?
As a different genre, or?
Yeah, like street photo genre itself.
I think he was proud, and I'm not sure if he did.
I'm not sure I understand the question, to be honest.
If I got it right, so you're asking whether he considered street photography as a genre?
Yeah, as a genre of...
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he would have labeled it street photography. I know that's the label that people put on Cartier-Bresson quite often. I think he was just one that captured moments around wherever he was. I didn't necessarily have to be street, unless we're using the word street photography just to mean, capturing the, quote again, decisive moment, which is an overused term, I think, but appropriate to Elliott in terms of the moments that he captured. Does that answer the question? Is that?
Yes, and I had one more question.
Yeah.
Did he practice photography in his late years as well? Because there aren't a lot of published.
Well, maybe
Was he working in his late years? Is
yeah.
that,
Yes.
Yes, the answer to that is yes, as much as he could. I mean, there were some faculties of his that prevented him from doing what he would like to do in some cases, but he created these wonderful Christmas cards every year, which were him in some bizarre context that were very humorous. They're a collector's item. We were fortunate to receive many of them. We always looked forward to that every Christmas. So he did what he could, but he did start to lean in his latter years to publishing books and making books. That was his passion.
And I think he mentioned that he's much slower than he would wish to be, or that he remembers himself being before. So I think that also held him back a little bit.
Right.
And we were talking just with your son, Maxwell is here. Hi, Maxwell. So he was bringing up the fact that when it was Obama's inauguration, then he was so Elliott was invited there to also take a photo, and he was pretty much sort of the only photographer that went analog, because it's like you could see that there's this famous photo that's taken by him. So he's taking the photo of Michelle and Barack, and at the same time, everyone around him has like 1 million phones, and this kind of like digital clicking is going around, and Elliott just went there and took a shot. And
Right, but I think the point of that story is, and this describes Elliott, was that he went to the inauguration. It was a freezing winter day that day. It was, with the whole cattle call of photographers, did his bit, went back to the hotel room. He was literally frozen, almost frostbite. His assistant threw some blankets on him in bed, and then around 7 o'clock, he all of a sudden got up. I'm just repeating a story that I wasn't there, obviously. But at 7 o'clock, he got up, and his assistant said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I have only one invitation to the inaugural ball." So the assistant could not come with him. And again, he's 80 years old or whatever it is, and he gets up and he gets his gear and he goes to the ball. And when he arrives, he's again amidst all these other photographers who were all shooting digital, and they were all just kind of, as we say, leaning on the shutter, so just taking gazillion shots. And Elliott took his camera out and he took 4 frames or 6 frames and then put his camera away and left, and got a shot which is, I don't know where it was published at the time, but it's an iconic shot that captures it's not here. That shot's not here, right?
No, that one isn't here.
But it's a sea of people holding up their iPhones, and he's from behind it, so you could see, in concerts when everybody holds up their iPhones, you could see it all lit, and Obama is making a speech at the ball there, and it just captures the moment of our first black president, and also the beginning of the digital age, where, because the iPhone had just basically come out or proliferated to the point where it's a sea of phones. So the point is that that for someone to go there and just be as secure as he was, that within these 6 frames that he took and then leave, speaks volumes about what he knows he can get and the way he sees.
Yeah, and he often said that it really boils down to experience and the sense that you as a photographer get, that you'll know when you got a shot. You don't need the digital camera in order to check whether someone's head is in the frame or not. You just have that sense.
Right.
Yeah.
It's also the surprise of the contact sheet when you get it to see, because you didn't see it beforehand, right?
Exactly.
And it makes, the thing about, this is a rabbit hole to go down, but, one could argue, the difference between shooting film and digital, the accessibility of digital makes it easy, and the fact that it's easy in his mind, or in his words, makes you sloppy. And when you only have 36 frames to work with in your camera, you tend to make sure that every shot or every time you click that shutter, it's something that you really care about or mean. So because that was a question that he was always asked that he hated also. So do you shoot digital? And why don't you shoot digital? Why are you always shooting film? So they always wrestle with that. You want me to read some quotes?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
In the meanwhile, you're going to search for the quotes. I'm just going to say
I
a
have
few
right here.
practicalities, which are that. So we'll soon conclude here, and then we will show you 2 of Elliott's movies. So I definitely urge you to have a look. I mean, you don't need to look through them like from the beginning to the end, because we will loop them, so you can enjoy the exhibition and then come and see the 2 movies. One of them is Beauty Knows No Pain, and the other one is Good Nudes. I think both of them we saw just shortly in your documentary as well. And then Douglas will stay here throughout the night, depending on his jet lag, because he did come all over from New York. But he will be here, so if you want to hear some more and then maybe a few stories of some particular photos, then I think he's happy to chat.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll leave you with some of these, because these are his words, which are much better than our words, with all due respect.
I agree.
And so here's a few things, and I'll skip where necessary here. Photography is an art of observation. It has little to do with the things you see and everything to do with the way you see them. Taking pictures is a response to what you see and what you think you see, and it's very easy not to respond to the quality of the image you shot until you see it in a different circumstance, which is what we were talking about with him, going back to his contact sheets. People take themselves too seriously. Very Elliott. He was born in Paris. He loved it. It's a beautiful city. It has a lot of French people in it, which is a disadvantage. Dogs, he's always asked about dogs, and you probably heard this, but he said, why do you take pictures of dogs? Well, they're sympathetic creatures. They have human characteristics, and he always says over and over again in his response, and they never ask for prints. Once he really didn't like the fashion business. He did some of it, but the whole scene of fashion, he caused them to repel, whatever. So anyway, he had to do a fashion shoot, and he says, these are quotes, "I was hired to do a fashion shoot with a monkey, and the monkey was supposed to ape the same movements as the model. I discovered that my day rate was $250 a day, and the monkey's day rate was $350 a day." And that's a true story.
And he often says as well that if youngsters are asking him what to do to become a photographer, then he either says that just keep busy and then do it as a hobby, or become a monkey. So that's a reference to that one. Yeah.
Speaking of monkeys, we have a special guest here today. I don't know if you noticed in the film, there's a sequence in the Andrea Soledor film where there's the live gorilla, there's the real gorilla that's holding the naked model, all right? And that actor happens to be here today. Where is he? Maxwell?
I don't think he's gonna. Okay, so he's there.
Okay, he was the gorilla. Okay.
Oh, you have to say what Elliott said when I love that part.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't work because he has a little facial hair now, but Maxwell, who was my son and worked on the film, saw Elliott. This was years later, and he said, "Elliott, I was the gorilla in the film." And Elliott said, "You shaved." Okay. The only reason to take photos is to communicate with people. I once wanted to be a clown, and I once wanted to be a comedy writer. Also, I'm attracted to emotional situations, and I am bored by serious people. Photography meant everything to him. He always said, "It's my career, it's my misspent life, and my well-spent life, so you might say it's my life." Let's see. The color thing we talked, he said, "I have little interest in color as far as he's concerned. He can't manipulate us, he can't black and white. Color is always pretty and gets in the way of things."
Do you have the technique one? The one where he says that no technique in the world will compensate for the inability to see. I hope I quoted it right, but I love that one.
Very much against intellectualizing and clever rationalizations of the reasons and motives behind one's work. And that kind of sums up what we've been trying to say while it's difficult to talk about his work. Let's see. Here's a good one. He said, when asked how he had time for his personal work when he had so many demanding assignments over the years, he quipped, "I use a fast shutter speed." he disliked interviews, as I was saying, because they were always asked the same questions. Why do you take pictures of dogs? Monroe, and favorite photograph. Okay, so here's my and his favorite stupid question. All right, you ready? This is great. Someone asked, "Were you there when you took the picture?" And his reply was, "Probably." It just doesn't get better than that, I don't think. That's why he didn't want to talk anymore.
Yeah.
You get asked a question like that, and you just like, okay. He said, "I don't believe that photography can change the world, but it can show the world." And last, in my 90s, my work looks different than I've ever seen it before. There's a time for photographs to say hello, and there's a time to listen.
That's a good one. So now we will wrap this up, you and I. We'll get off the stage, and for you, it's time to either enjoy the movies and also please enjoy the exhibition, walk around, enjoy his works. There's 100 photos by Elliott here, and Douglas will stick around. There's a bar, which we will keep actually open every Saturday, but tonight, of course, it's open as well. So get something nice you like, enjoy the exhibition, look through the movies, and you and I will actually record a podcast tomorrow, so you can keep your ears out for when it's finally on our website, and you can listen to us some more, because as you can see, we enjoy talking. But anyhow, there's also thanks. There's also some books here. There's, I think, 4 books by Elliott's works out of the almost 50. So we chose 4 for you. So have a look at them as well, and you can purchase them if you like some of his works, which I hope you do. And we will every Saturday have also tours, which we will this time do in English. So if you have any other friends of Elliott's works, then you can send them here on Saturdays at 4 o'clock. And from us, thank you for coming.
Yes. Thank
Enjoy
you very
the works.
much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely.